So let's move now to the discussion part. So Tineke, could you join the other speakers, please? And as we lag a bit in the schedule, so let's move directly to the question and comment part. And before we launch, so maybe the panelists can then comment each other. But I think now it's your turn. You have waited patiently your turn. So please, comments. So there, please start. And please be loud. And panelists, please use your microphones. So please, if you can stand up.
I'll sit down unless anyone can't hear me in a nice room.
Could you stand up if it's possible, sir? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I wanted to be a little bit of an optimist here, and I wanted to pick up this issue of ideology being too dominant and something that we can't possibly deal with. Actually, in many ways, I think that's the only thing we can deal with at the minute. It's certainly the case that we come across an ideology which is very strong, and it's so strong that it becomes almost illogical, so that the EU report that referred to earlier on corporate governance has this great analysis, and all these peer review, they all have great analysis, and you say, and they come to the point that says, yeah, what is the problem? Why are we going to this financial crisis? Well, because there was too much management pursuing shareholder value, short-termism in mind, and so on. So it's a great idea. I agree with that analysis. We all agree with that analysis. And then my conclusion is, so what we need to do is to empower shareholders to get them engaged, because shareholders will be much less inclined to pursue their own self-value, their own self-interest, and the directors will into sort of absurdity. But it's an absurdity that's locked in because the ideology says we can't think of anything else. The only thing we can think of is different ways to keep pursuing the same agenda. And so I think that's something that we really need to try and look outside of and create a new ideology that will confront this all-pervading ideology, which brings out very intelligent people to extremely absurd conclusions on their analysis. So yes, the market is hugely terrible. All sorts of things. Localization is hugely terrible. The race to the bottom, in regulatory terms, is a hugely terrible. And ideology is one of those things we can confront.
Thank you. Do you want to comment? Okay, David, please, and then Beate after.
Briefly,
please, please be short in your comments, however.
I'll be very brief. I agree with Lorraine. Ideology is a big part of this, but it's not the only thing, and I think not the biggest part of it. I think the biggest part of it are the financial incentives that reward management for pursuing short-term shareholder value, and the legal obligations and also market-based incentives that lead major shareholders, powerful shareholders, to insist on short-term returns. And until those incentives are dealt with, I don't think you can expect to see significant change. Second point would be that it is funny that when in the U.S. in particular, when we have problems with business like the Enron scandals and then the financial crisis, the answer is always, well, empower the shareholders, give them more power, and that's because we live in this sort of bipolar world. It's either managers or shareholders, and of course the shareholders are the biggest problem. I agree completely with Blanaid about this, that the worst thing for the things that we're interested in now is to give shareholders more power.
Beate.
Thank you, Lorraine. Yes, we have this ideology which is increasingly being denoted also by commentaries in the Financial Times as the dumbest idea in the world. And it's still the main driver. So we need to change the ideology. And as we know from research in other areas, it is possible to spark a change in social norms and even moral norms through legal norms. We've seen this, for example, with the prohibition against smoking in public places, how that has changed our perception of smoking even in people's homes. And we've seen this in a company law-related context with the quite brave Norwegian initiative to introduce a rule saying that companies over a certain size, all public companies, have to have gender equality on the boards. They had to have that diversity. That was introduced not as a gender equality initiative, but as a corporate governance initiative, because it was an idea that you don't get the best boards if you exclude half of the population. That if you have just this white men's club, white men, middle-aged men from Oslo West, that's not enough. We need more, and that changing that in Norway has inspired other countries to do the same, and that is doing, it's one part of a change that is doing something about our attitude, so that it becomes a matter of course that when we're talking about how to get good boards, then we need diversity. So yes, we can change this ideology, and we need to spark the change with legal norms.
Thank you. Anders, please.
Thank you very much. One comment and maybe two questions. The comment is that I think it's a bit dangerous to talk about shareholders as a homogenic entity. As it is to talk about industry or private sector as a homogenic entity, or even politicians. Because there are companies and companies. And I see a lot of very, very bold CEOs now in a limited number of companies, but still. So I think it's very important if an agenda like this is going to be moved forward to identify possible partners. That's the first comment. The second is I've spent 10 years in the European Parliament as a member, and I know a little bit about how the EU works. It doesn't work. And the only way, to go back to what Blanaid said, to really have success in the EU is to either align ourselves with a few governments who could push an issue. If there are 1, 2 or 3 governments who are actually pushing an issue, change can happen. And or identify individuals in the European Parliament who can push the issue. So, and it's very important to understand how that hybrid works, because it doesn't work like a parliamentary system. It doesn't work like the US Congress. It doesn't work like the Norwegian Storting. There is no natural majority. Every time a decision is going to be taken, it has to be formed from the bottom up, so to say. There is no group that has a majority. And nobody looks upon it as a natural thing to defend the Commission. On the contrary. Thirdly, and then I still sit down, I think what we have to realize when it comes to externalities is that one of the main reasons why we have these huge externalities and all these problems in the natural world in relation to economic activities is that energy and raw materials were dirt cheap for 100 years. The world was very, very large and the economy was small. And we didn't have to care about energy and resources. Oil was very cheap, gas was cheap, metals were cheap. Productivity in the use of natural resources on average has gone up by a factor of 2, 2.5 over the last 100 years. Productivity when it comes to labor has gone up by a factor of 20 or even more. So we have to widen the productivity concept and start realizing that it's not only externalities and all the other problems, climate change, that is the challenge, but it's also a question of security, of sourcing. And I think that's a very important argument. Prices of everything, from oil to metals and even food, are going up. It's a volatile trend, but still they're going up. And I think if we could, parallel to this company law rethinking, if we could have push prices going up, I think business models would be changed, and we could have a lot of benefits just from a different logic based on what is there in terms of nature.
Thank you. Comments? Beate first.
Thank you very much, Anders. I totally agree that it's very important to remember that shareholders aren't homogeneous and companies aren't either. And there are shareholders that are interested, of course, in sustainability, and it's difficult for them within the current system. There are bold companies and bold CEOs. And indeed, one of the results from the empirical work done in this project is that the decision makers in companies, they want good regulation, that they can do the right thing within. But they want good regulation. They just don't want symbolic CSR regulation like has been introduced amongst other places in Norway this year. So we need to change this. And it's very good to get your advice on the EU system. And I agree that it's very important to have a discourse with the involved stakeholders, both in companies and without. We have a resource group in the Sustainable Companies Project where we've had very good discussions with people from business, people from trade unions, from NGOs, and we are interested in expanding that as we continue our work over the next months and years. Thank you.
Blanaid, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point, I totally agree with you in terms of getting companies on board to champion issues like that. And again, just being slightly cynical about it, you have to wonder why companies are coming on board. And in many cases, they're coming on board because, again, there's a reputational advantage to doing it, or there's a business case to doing it. And that's great. And in many cases, that will happen on its own. What's more difficult is when there's an uncompensatable cost, and that's CSR in its real sense. And so what do you do when there's an uncompensatable cost? And there, I think, you've got to put it into the law. And you've got to, Lorraine talked about ideologies, but you've got to view this in terms of what has to be done before you even begin to divvy up the profits. And, when we talked about the responsibility of a company to make as much money as possible within the law, that whole sentence, we have to make this within the law. We have to say, you have got to look after the environment, you have got to look after climate change. After that, then we will begin talking about balancing interests between shareholders and employees. And that's not a new paradigm. That's something we've done all the time. Nobody says you've got to balance profit with employee safety. Why? Because it's in the legislation. So let's put this in the legislation first, and then let's have that other argument about balancing what's left.
Andrew, you had a comment.
I just wanted to pick up on the idea that we should push prices up, and if there's obviously extra demand for the resources, we would expect prices to go up. I'm not sure that the extra demand leads to sustainability. It just indicates that more and more resources are being used. So I was wondering whether you were suggesting that we should government should raise the price of resources. It was more of a kind of an interventionist thing rather than the market pushing prices up. But I think we then border on very difficult questions like, are the prices of raw materials rising because there's greater demand for them, or are they rising because there is financial market manipulation using large amounts of kind of liquid cash which is sloshing around, and there's a kind of we don't really know the answer to that question as things stand.
It's a mixed bag, of course, but if you look at crude oil, companies have to go for much more difficult exploration sites than in the past, so prices going up. The shale revolution in the US is about. I have so much evidence now telling me that. Gas will be coming from fracking, but oil, no way. So, oil, I think we are going to hit the wall in terms of fossil fuels, not coal, but the others, in the next 5 to 10 years, because the demand is increasing so fast in China, India, etc. And this is a threat to the conventional economy, because Kumo, James Hamilton, Rubin, and others have shown that once the energy price goes up equivalent to $140, $150 US per barrel of oil, the economy stops the way it's organized. And then there's no innovation, and then there's no investments in the future. So it's a very, very tight balancing act. So I would say efficiency in resource use is a must. Metals is the same thing. You need more energy because you have taken the richest ores already, etc., etc. And I agree with you, we should put a tax on virgin materials to stimulate recycling and reuse, and take away the tax on labor. The whole economy would shift. and we would have a service economy, instead of selling new products all the time, we would hire things of a higher quality that last longer, and there would be a service economy to service them. My friend Montestein has written a beautiful book about that, the performance economy, where you change business models. You do more with what you already have produced, which makes sense for a family, but which doesn't make sense for the GDP. But leave GDP aside and focus on the result. Sorry.
Yep. Wait a moment. Charlotte, nice to see you, but we must go. There are two speakers firstly. But please be short. So, please.
Really just to give us a very quick example of my own situation in the UK, and I've got a bit of optimism and a bit of depression. The optimism comes from a recent situation with some students in Manchester University. They were economics students and they protested. They said, we don't want this to their economics lecturers. They're being fed the same old stuff that we've seen for the last 40, 50 years, and they said, we don't want it. And I think that's relevant to us as lawyers in this room, certainly as corporate lawyers, because again, my own students have swallowed all this law and economics stuff, which I think is connected. So I see a bit of optimism there. I think that the younger generation are definitely saying, we don't want this same old dribble. So what I'd like to find out really is more, what are the progressive economics theories that are available that we can explore more fully? But also coming back to Tineke's paper, I was in the UN yesterday and I found that to be a thoroughly depressing experience. I found it really was, because I was talking a bit about what you were saying this morning and I felt it was really falling on deaf ears.
Where was that?
At the United Nations, it was a forum on business and human rights. So I thought that I was going to something that would be reasonably progressive, but it really wasn't. And it highlights the point that Tineke made, which was that a lot of people see things as in their little corner. So there was a lot of tinkering around the edges. There was goodwill, but there was no real questioning of the fundamental structures. And I think that's something we have to really, really hone in on. It's the structures that are really problematic. Talking just about directors or managers and shareholders is definitely not enough. I think we've got to truly open up our companies, make genuine access to all the people who really are affected by what they do. The annual general meetings in the UK are a complete waste of time, but they might not be if we open the door to many of these other representative groups.
Let's take, there are two commentators here, so let's take first. So please, you asked. Yeah, please stand up.
Gail Henderson, I had a question directed at Blanaid specifically, but if any of the other panelists want to comment on the issue of enforcement, which I think is clearly the next step after what we were talking about here. And Blanaid, you mentioned the idea of an agency enforcing this responsibility of companies to be more environmentally sustainable. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, who the agency would be. Is it an environmental agency or a corporate law agency? And if anyone else has sort of comments on the enforcement aspect.
And let's take your comment or question, so please.
My name is cont'd. I'm working for the city of Oslo. And I just had a comment, and I want to support Anders in his comment on that. There's different types of shareholders and directors, and it does have an impact. And I want to refer to the social sciences research on behavior, because there is a lot of behavior supporting that what makes companies act more environmentally friendly or ecologically responsible and become more focused on that agenda. And I mean, one reason is law, reputational risk, and enforcement that I've been seeing good. That's one driver. Another driver is to want to see the business case, the opportunities, extended markets, saving money, whatever have you. But the strongest one, by far, is the personal conviction of the leaders. What ethics, what business culture, the things, if they believe that this is the right way to go, and where to go. Social science research, what I have read on the subject, supports that is important. So it's important not to just overemphasize the ones that's just the two first ones. They're there, but they're not the only ones.
So please, Tineke first.
Is this one on? Yeah. Okay,
believe
thank
so.
you very much. Well, dear Chair, that I also was in Geneva, and I had a very optimistic feeling. Not the full 2 days, I was Monday and Tuesday there, but definitely after the speech of Joseph Stiglitz, who really emphasized that we should go beyond the business case, and that not because it's beneficial to companies, but because it's the right thing to do, to go for inclusivity and to open up to other people and the environment, to include those values in the corporate purpose thing of companies. He had a very interesting speech. I think it will be available online. Then I will bridge to my own presentation. One of the conclusions that we had in the meta study of empirical studies is that law is really seen often by directors as a compliance issue. Sorry on the comment that personal leadership is very important. That's also important, but ultimately law is very much seen as a compliance issue. So in that respect, I agree very much with Blanaid that the more you can get in the law, I mean, that's the strategy that we have been applying for the last 200 years, I think, the more you can push companies to do the things that you want to do. And then I also agree with Blanaid that it's not about the companies that give a good example. I mean, they're very important. I mean, they set the tone that we want to hear, and we want to celebrate what they are introducing, but it's not going fast enough. That's one comment. So they also need this level playing field supported by law. But the problem is with the companies with the stranded assets, like the oil companies and the tobacco companies and the weapon industry. They have stranded assets. They are on a dead road. And what should we do with them? Because they are the ones that are lobbying. They are the ones that are protesting and stopping legislation to push into to push companies into a transition phase. So my question actually to the audience and the panel would be to should the government play a role in that? Should they help those oil companies and tobacco companies and weapon companies and maybe some other mining companies to really go into a transition to another type of company, a recycle company or a reducing electricity use company or whatever, like Anders also proposed, like more a service company. I mean, they are not going to do it by themselves because they have invested for the next 30, 40 years in those stranded assets.
Mm-hmm. So we have 5 minutes left, so Beate and Andrew first, please. Beate.
Okay. I just want to address the issue of the relationship between law and other drivers, and I think the one doesn't exclude the other. We want the law to be a floor, to say that all companies, that you cannot go beneath that level. Like Blanaid said, first you have this framework. Within that, you can do whatever you like. You can earn a lot of profits, or you can be front runners going beyond the requirements of the law. But we need to set the legal framework in a much clearer way.
Andrew, please, and Blanaid after that.
I just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments. The first comment about the well-documented tendency that human beings want to do good, and it is well documented that humans want to act in ethical ways, but the problem is that if you pay them a large amount of money to act in unethical ways, they're happy to do that. And the one economic axiom that I sign up to is that incentives work. And so we're back to this discussion about fundamentally needing to reform incentives. How do we put greed back into the box with the current generation of executives? Probably we can't. Maybe with future generations of executives we can prevent greed from coming out of the box by capping pay and banning alignment with the share price. As for Charlotte's point, I think there's a lot of uprisings going on in students in economics, but economics in universities is totalitarian. It brooks no dissent. In law schools, we're more pluralist, right? And they get to study human rights, and then they get to study companies. And I try and teach them a kind of critical company law, as I know you do, Charlotte. And I said to one group, so after all this, what are you for? Shareholder value or pluralism? And they were all for shareholder value, even though they're all believers in human rights, right? They all believe in human rights, they all believe in the environment, but they also all believe in shareholder value. Now, that is a harder thing to break down.
No, Blanaid, please.
Thanks. Just very briefly to answer just Gail's question in terms of enforcement. I think the corporate governance green paper was interesting in this response, and the responses from the various stakeholders in that. But what the Commission have said is that Comply or Explain is not working fully, and they need to improve it. And they've suggested a number of possible options. One, they've suggested regulators do it. Regulators don't have the time or the experience, the expertise to do it. Auditors do it. Financial crisis, I think, are the only two words I need to say in response to that. They're not appropriate, nor do they want it. So again, I think it will involve an environmental agency doing it, who have the expertise and the resources and the time. And just one last point, just to the interesting question you raise about social science and incentives. I think you're also right. You're correct, but you also need to remember some of the other sort of theories in terms of incentives that we should be aware of. So one of them is the idea of crowding out, and which suggests that on occasion intrinsic incentives like doing the right thing because it's right can be crowded out by extrinsic incentives, and one example of that would be bonuses, and the point Andrew's just made. But we have to be careful that the legal obligation we're talking about doesn't become that extrinsic incentive, so that people say, well, look, I've complied with the law, so that's me done. So just...
I think you missed my point. My point was to support Anders that through leaders like that, we create more of a public mandate to pass the necessary laws and legislation to get to where Beate is saying that we need to raise the bar for where the bottom is. That was my point. And the studies I referred to are studies specifically of what make companies act more ecologically, and not more a general psychological thing, but what drives people.
So, last word for David.
I have no last.
Okay, then the session is closed. It's 12 sharp. Thank you, and sorry for bullying you. So, but I think we are in the schedule.